Good evening. I could shed a few tears about saying goodbye tonight, but I hope the tears will remain invisible, but that in spite of this invisibility, that you will know that they are there, because they are. It isn't too much to say that London has become a habit, or England has become a habit, a hard one to break, a delightful one to enjoy. And the fact that here we are surrounded with students that have been with us 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years is of importance. Importance is hardly the word. Vital. Because this is the evidence, this is the living witness to the power of the message, that without memberships, without dues, without any human ties or any human obligations existing between us, that we have been together for so many years. So, it may be that our absence this time will be a very short duration, because we hope to be back with you in June. Now, if you were asked by someone knowing your interest in the message of the infinite way, if you were asked, what is this infinite way? What is this that is holding your interest or benefiting you? I think you would have a difficult time answering, because that which holds you, that which benefits you, that which you know is your comforter, is something that you know with your fourth dimensional consciousness, your spiritual consciousness. And if you try to impart it to someone still in the third dimensional consciousness, in material consciousness, they would never understand your language. For instance, you might say, "Oh, I have discovered that evil isn't power." And then, of course, you would be ridiculed. Or you might say, "I have discovered God." "Ah, that's very interesting. Tell us about that." You see how foolish you feel. Anyone who has ever been called upon to tell what they know about God has felt the same way. No one can do that. And the reason is, whatever it is that you know about God, you do not know with your mind. You have already broken through the area of mind, and you have been lifted into the higher consciousness, and whatever it is that you know about God, you know through your spiritual awareness, spiritual discernment, soul faculties. And to try to tell this to a person in the materialistic consciousness would be really nonsensical, if not impossible. You see, the infinite way begins with a revelation that there is a transcendental consciousness, that which in Christian mysticism is called Christ consciousness, spiritual consciousness, that which in Oriental teachings is called the Buddha mind or Buddhi. In either case, what it really means is that there is a higher consciousness than the human mind. You may think, of course, that this is very generally known, but it's not true. It may be known that Buddha had that mind and that Jesus had that mind which was in Christ Jesus, but it is not known that this is a universal mind or consciousness, and that it is just as much yours and mine as it was that of Jesus and of Buddha. In other words, the mind that was in Christ Jesus has been personalized. And some would even go as far as to admit that there were a few others that had some measure of it. Moses, Elijah, Isaiah, John, Paul. That's still personalizing it. Buddha, Lao Tzu, that is still personalizing it. But in the infinite way, you have the revelation of this God consciousness, Christ mind, Christ consciousness, spiritual consciousness, as universal. This alone would be difficult to explain to those who have been conditioned into believing that there is a little Christ mind here which was bottled up in Jesus, or maybe a few others. If you have perceived, and more especially if you have in any degree demonstrated that that consciousness is your consciousness, you are going to find a great difficulty in imparting that to anyone else. Nevertheless, this is one of the first of the infinite way unfoldments that must be recognized, acknowledged by you, admitted by you. You can, if you've had any experience with me personally, you can begin by admitting that you have witnessed or experienced some of it in me, even a tiny measure, and that will be that'll be the opening of the door, because the moment you acknowledge that you have received any spiritual benefit by your contact with me or with the infinite way, you will have to acknowledge that that could only be by virtue of that mind that was in Christ Jesus, spiritual consciousness. And that will be the little crack that will open the whole door, because eventually you will have to admit, if it could happen to Joel, it could happen to anybody on the face of the earth, because there isn't a single thing in his human history that sets him apart from anybody else. There isn't a single incident in his history that gives us any reason to believe that he lived any other than an ordinary human life with the usual combination of good and evil, up and down, success and failure, that everyone else has experienced. And therefore, if that could happen to him, then he's telling the truth when he is revealing not only that it can happen, that eventually it is going to happen to everyone on the face of the globe. Because one thing Joel has learned of God, and that is that God has never done anything for Joel. Whatever light Joel has received was not that he may be healthier or wealthier, or that he may gain a personal reputation. God had no interest in such things. Every bit of light that has come through my consciousness has been that the world may receive God's light. That is why all of these publishers have been given to us to publish these works. That is why all the tapes have been made available from the very beginning, when tape recorders were scarce and unknown. God working through individual consciousness to reveal the nature of the universal divine consciousness. I stand at the door and knock. In the light of what you have been hearing this entire trip in England, does this have greater significance for you? I stand at the door and knock. Do you understand that that does not mean a man who lived 2,000 years ago? Do you know that that does not mean a man who is sitting on this platform? Do you know that that does not mean anything other than what it says? That I is knocking at the door of your consciousness and begging to be admitted, so that you do open the door of your consciousness and admit I. Oh, thank you, Father. I, in the midst of me, is God. I. Now I know why it says, be still and know that I am God. I. Why, that I has been knocking at my door, at the door of my consciousness. Every time I read the New Testament, it's been knocking. I've been reading, I am with you. Be not afraid. Fear not, I am with you. I will never leave you. I has been knocking at the door of my consciousness every time I turn to the teaching of Jesus. Oh, how I pray now that this door of my consciousness will open, that I can admit that I, and understand what the Master meant. I is God. God is I. Infinite, divine, universal being. Your consciousness and mine. Your Father and mine. I is the creative principle of this universe. And this I has been knocking at the door of our consciousness for centuries, begging to be admitted, and all that we have done is to keep holding it back in the Holy Lands of 2,000 years ago. The infinite way reveals to you that this very I is the illumined consciousness, the God consciousness that you are seeking. That which I am seeking, I am. That very illumination, that very initiation, that very enlightenment, the I of my being is the very bread, food, clothing, housing, happiness, peace, security that I am seeking. I am. That I that has been knocking at the door trying to get into my consciousness, that very I is my supply. I cannot demonstrate supply. I can only demonstrate I. I cannot demonstrate security. I cannot pray for security. I'll never be able to save enough money to have security, as many ex-millionaires have found out. The only security we can have is when the door of our consciousness has opened and admitted the I, so that I can say, I in the midst of me is mighty. Now, all of this comes under the heading of the nature of God. And as you read now the Infinite Way writings, notice that in almost every chapter it says to you somewhere, you must know the nature of God. You must learn the nature of God. Your entire life depends on your knowing the nature of God. To know Him aright is life eternal. And until you know God aright, do not fool yourselves by believing that you have attained immortality, because you attain immortality only in the degree that you know Him aright. And you will never know Him aright until you know Him as I, the Spirit of God in me, I, the still small voice within me. The kingdom of God is within you, and God is in His kingdom. God constitutes His kingdom. I and the Father are one. Now, either, as I speak these words to you, either they are bringing forth from within you a joyous feeling of acceptance, a joy at hearing them, a feeling of yes, 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 I always knew that must be so. Either that, or the veil is still there. The door of your consciousness has not opened to admit I. And therefore, for you it will be necessary to abide in this Word and let this Word abide in you until the door of your consciousness does open and you admit the I that is standing there knocking. And remember, that which is knocking at the door is I. I stand at the door. Not a person. I. Not any person. I. The very I that is the way, the truth, and the life. The very I that is the bread, the meat, the wine, and the water. Sometimes when we say to a student, you're keeping your own health away from you, you're keeping your own supply away from you, you're keeping your own companionship away from you. How? You won't open the door of your consciousness and admit me. Me, I. You won't admit the I that is knocking there. You're looking for another God, or else you're not looking for a God at all. You're looking for some fruitage of God, some benefit of God. You'll never find it. God doesn't give health. God doesn't give supply. God doesn't give peace. God doesn't give security. God is all of this. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection. The I doesn't send these or give these. The I is these, embodies these. And when you open the door of your consciousness and admit I, then you will find, first slowly, gradually, because none of us could take it all in one leap, but you will find that that presence flows out from you in the forms necessary to your daily experience. That is why the mystical path is the most practical way of life that has ever been known. They try to tell us that the materialistic way is. But if you look at the history of the materialistic countries, I think you will agree they have not yet found the way. Even if you look at the history of the countries that once had all the gold and all the pounds and all the dollars, you'll find they haven't got it anymore. Why? You see, everything out in this world is really like a shadow. If I have opened my door to I, and I realize that I in the midst of me is God, closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, I in the midst of me is this allness, then it makes no difference if for some reason my health has left me today, or my wealth has left me today, or my home, or my family. It really makes no difference, because this I is the resurrection. This I restores the lost years of the locust. And all that I ever had will be restored to me twice over, as in the case of Job. You see, Job demonstrated all of the most wonderful things of life. He had it all: wealth, wife, children, grandchildren, success. Oh, he had it all. And then it disappeared. And he was sure that God was punishing him. God wasn't listening to his prayers. God had deserted him. You see, he didn't know God. All he had in his mind was an ancient Hebrew concept of God. And that's just as bad as a Christian concept of God, or a Vedantic concept of God, or any other concept of God that has ever been given. For no concept of God is God. Only I is God. Once you realize God, once you realize that I in the midst of you am He, you will discover then that the lost years of the locust are restored. Everything that has ever been taken from you because of your ignorance of God is now restored to you, and twice over. Of course, in some countries they can't restore 2 wives, it's illegal, but everything else can be restored twice over. Maybe the wife would love you twice as much. But, you see, none of this is possible except to those who have opened the door of their consciousness and admitted the I that is standing there knocking. Now, this comes under the heading of knowing the nature of God, and it constitutes 1/2 of the revelation of the message of the infinite way. And you will find that about 1/2 of every book and 1/2 of every class is devoted to the revelation of the nature, the omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience of God. Now, to explain this to those of the human world is not only difficult but impossible. And therefore you will know why the Master said, feed the babes the milk of the Word. Feed it to them gently until they have come to maturity, spiritual maturity, and then you can remove that last veil without shocking them and show them that I is standing at the door of their consciousness begging admittance. So it is with the other half of the message. The second half of the message of the infinite way is very difficult to impart, and my experience shows that very few students are able to grasp this part under 3 or 4 or 5 years of study and practice, because to the human mind it is ridiculous. To the human mind it is impossible. And the student, a young student, is studying with the human mind. And it seems almost impossible to accept this principle. The mind itself wants to reject it even while you are affirming it. Nevertheless, it is the second half of the revelation, and equally important to the first, and in some cases more important. There have been hundreds of mystics in the history of the world who have been lifted so high in consciousness that they have realized I. As a matter of fact, there have been numerous poets who have caught glimpses of it, and so we have a tremendous amount of mystical poetry, all based on the I. It isn't that those poets caught the full significance of it, they caught glimpses of it. But there have been hundreds of mystics over the centuries who have caught the full import of I, and yet never rounded out a happy, healthy, successful life. Never raised up a body of students capable of revealing to the world the divine harmony that is here for everyone. And the reason is they missed this second principle. It's only by the grace of God that we have it, and evidently because the time is right for it. We call this second principle, the second half of the message, the nature of error. Oh, you may have heard this. A lot of people have declared it, that Joel is such a fine fellow, it's too bad that he wastes so much time with the nature of error. So far, my life doesn't testify to the fact that it's been a waste of time. Not only it isn't a waste of time, but I can assure you that without it, this world isn't going to be any different in the next generation than it is in this. We have had previous previous revelations of I. It didn't save the world. But this one will, especially in combination with the revelation of I. In your meditations, eventually you come to a communion with God, a tabernacling with God. God is just as real inside of you as your wife or husband outside is real. Just as real. That presence is as present, as real, as tangible, more so than anything you have ever known. And when, through your meditations, you begin to commune with that spirit within you, it will very quickly convince you that the powers of the world are not powers. More especially, that the evil powers of the world are not evil. In fact, nothing is evil except thinking makes it so, accepting it makes it so. But in and of itself, there is no evil. In whatever measure you have experienced a spiritual healing, you have already proved it. In other words, if you had a cold even, which is supposed to be a power, a fever with it that is supposed to be a power, if you have had a spiritual healing of it, that means without the application of any medical or physical remedies, then you know that what has been proven is that that cold wasn't the power it claimed to be. Or, if you have had any more serious illness, and through your own or another's spiritual consciousness, you have witnessed the pain disappear, the symptoms disappear, harmony restored. All that you have really experienced is the nothingness of that which had been the disease. Because if it was something, it would still be something. The very fact that without any material remedies, surgeries, applications, that it disappeared means definitely that it really wasn't what it claimed to be. In the earliest stages of metaphysical healing, this wasn't understood. It was believed that mind or spirit was the power that healed the disease. In, for instance, the New Thought teachings, it was mind that was the power that healed the disease. In the spiritual teachings, it was God or spirit that was the power that removed it. But you see, these teachings haven't stood up because they weren't absolute truth. They were just partial truth. The truth is that God is omnipotence. This is the truth. Well, if you accept that, you must logically even follow it up with, well then, nothing but God is power. And that means the powerlessness of anything that is appearing to you as power, whether it is person, thing, circumstance, or condition. You can then objectively look at it out here and realize how impossible it would be for you to be a power or have a power if God is omnipresence, the only presence, and omnipotence, the only power. So it is that the more aware you become of the nature of God as omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, the more aware you become of the non-power of this world of effect. And you may say, why didn't these mystics of old discover it? And the answer is they were conditioned. Just like some of the modern mystics, they're so conditioned to believe that karma is power, more powerful even than God, or even that God uses evil for his purpose. They're so conditioned that they cannot surrender this belief in the power of sin, disease, false appetite, lack, limitation. This is what makes it so difficult to explain to those who have not inwardly been led to such a teaching. You who have been led to it can more easily realize that you have already experienced the non-power of error in some form or other, but that you have only made a beginning. In our work, we have witnessed the impersonal nature of God, meaning that God is not a person, that God is not localized even as the mind of some person, but that God is being. But God is infinite being. Therefore, God must be your being and my being. And that is what makes it easy for us to accept I as the name of God, because I have the name of I and you have the name of I. Each one of us is I. And God is that infinite I in us. When we have seen the universal nature of God as I, as the I of every individual, as the I of every cat and dog and bird, beast. This is when the lion and the lamb will lie down together, when we recognize I as the universal being, infinite being. This is when we will make friends of our enemies, not by overcoming our enemies, but by recognizing I in the midst of you am I in the midst of me, and we are one. Probably some of you heard that television broadcast last night. It was very interesting to us, of a gentleman in Scotland who has been giving away millions of pounds, and he was interviewed by a reporter, and the reporter asked him, when you give away these millions of pounds, don't you feel a loss? Don't you feel that something's missing after you've given it away? And the gentleman smiled, really he laughed. He said, no, it's a very strange thing. As fast as I give it away, it comes back. He said, I don't understand it, but it does happen. Well, of course, that has been explained in the infinite way. I am you. There's only one I. The selfhood of God is the selfhood of you, the selfhood of me. And if I give to you, I'm giving to myself. If you give to me, you're giving to yourself. And so I've usually said to students, it's like transferring your money from your right-hand pocket to your left. And it does turn out that way once you begin to understand the I, which is God, that's knocking at the door of your consciousness. Admit that I. Then you will know I, Joel, and I, Mary, or I, Helen. We are all that I. That I is functioning, all of us. And for this reason, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Because I am the least of these my brethren, and the least of these my brethren am I. Whatever you've done to another, you have done unto yourself. And this can explain some of that karma to you. The evil that you do another is bound to come back on you. There's an elastic band attached to it. And the stone you throw has to come back. But the good you do also has an elastic band. And the further and harder you throw it, the sooner and harder it comes back to you. And this is the lesson we are learning, that God is individual selfhood. God is not floating around in the air any more than God is up in the sky. God is manifest as individual you and me. And if God is to appear in the midst of us, God must appear as an individual, you and me. God is not bodiless. There can't be a being without a body. The body doesn't have to be physical in nature, but it is a body. And remember this: every individual embodies that I, divine being. It is their consciousness. It is veiled over by the belief that we're humans, that we're mortals, that we were conceived in sin and brought forth in iniquity. It is veiled over by the belief that only a few men knew the I, or divine consciousness. Until recently, They wouldn't even admit that it was open to any woman to have. That's why in some churches a woman couldn't be minister. How could she? She couldn't have the mind that was in Christ Jesus. Well, we'll be commencing to see how false that is. Now, first of all, to follow this infinite way, open the door of your consciousness and admit the I that is knocking there, and in secret, don't try to explain it to your friends. Don't think that you're going to be able to give it to them through the human mind. They couldn't any more accept it than you could have accepted it on my first trip here. And I knew all this on my first trip here and could have told it to you. And I can imagine what you would have done about it the second trip. Now, it's like the dance of the seven veils. They have to drop one by one. Then comes the unveiling, then comes the revelation, and then it's no shock. Now, when you have taken that first step, be sure that you do not do what some of our friends have done. Get absolute. Please don't get absolute. Some have even gone away to write books. Omitting the nature of error. Oh, we don't need that because God is all in all. Unless you do take seriously the nature of error, eventually you are going to get to that place of God and think you've found a great power over the evils of this world. And eventually you'll be fooled, because it won't be there. God is not a power over the evils of this world. The Hebrews prayed to God to destroy the evils of their world, and they have never succeeded. Since there has been Christianity, the Christians have been praying to overcome the evils of their world, and they have never succeeded. And all the other religions have been praying to overcome the evils of their world, and they have never been overcome. And they never will be overcome until we come to the recognition that we have been wasting time fighting evil. If God could fight evil, you wouldn't have to pray to God to do it. God would be doing it without your advising him. What God isn't doing, you better not start telling him about. For God's wisdom is infinite. Not yours, God's. Your wisdom is infinite when you have died sufficiently to your beliefs, to your theories, to your concepts, and in meditation have opened your consciousness to receive God's wisdom. Then your wisdom is infinite. Now, we don't have to pray to God to remove our sins, our diseases, our deaths. First, we must recognize I in the midst of me is God. And then, with Isaiah, is there any power but me? I know not any. That I in the midst of me is omnipotence. Put up thy sword. Mental sword, physical sword, medical sword. Put up thy sword. Abide in me. Let me, the I, abide in you. You'll bear fruit richly. But as you become a witness to the evils of this world, as they turn up in your experience, or your families, your neighbors, your nations, be sure that in your meditation you cover both of the principles of the infinite way. Be very sure that you have opened the door of your consciousness and admitted the I and acknowledged. Be not afraid, Joel. I am with you. Be not afraid of those out there. I am He. I am here and I am there. Be not afraid. I in the midst of you am mighty. I am life eternal. I am the way. Just rely on I. Fear no danger, for there is no power external to you. I, in the midst of you, am infinite power, the all power, the only power. Live by grace. Since I am your meat, your wine, your water, since I can give to you waters which if you drink you will never thirst again, since I have meat the world knows not of, since I am the resurrection, please realize I am the way. I am the way to your peace. I am the way to your abundance. I am the way to your safety. I am a rock. I am a fortress. I am a high tower. Abide in me and let me abide in you, and no evil shall come nigh thy dwelling place. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper. Why? They are shadows. They are not reality. They are not powers. I, in the midst of you, am omnipotence, the only power. These arrows, these poison darts, these germs, these bullets, these bombs, they are shadows. They are beliefs in a power apart from God. They are a universal belief in two powers. Believe in me as omnipotence. Don't accept God as a power over all the errors of the world, because then you are merely in all of the orthodox religions of the world, Oriental or Occidental. You are never in mysticism until you have opened your consciousness and accepted that I, in the midst of you, am He, the one you have sought, that Christ was incarnated in you, that the Annunciation means the conception of the Christ in you. Your recognition is the birth of the Christ in you. But when you accept this, don't forget, without the second half, you are not complete. Until you have seen the omnipotence of I and the non-power of that which is appearing as a world of effect, you have not completed it. You will, in your experience, be dealing with people of various degrees of evil. If not personally, you will in your national or international life. And it isn't enough, I can assure you, to bear witness to the fact that Christ is in them. You must take the second step as well and recognize that the carnal mind is not power. Only this completes your treatment. Only this completes your prayer or your meditation. Until you have now acknowledged, I in the midst of me is God, I in the midst of you is God, and then that the carnal mind, the universal belief in two powers, is none power, then and then alone have you completed it. You will witness it in experience with animals. It will not always be enough to recognize their Christ identity, their spiritual identity, because they, just like humans, are often governed by the carnal mind. And so it is that it is necessary to nothingize the carnal mind. Don't personalize it and believe that this person is evil. This person is just an outlet for the universal evil, the universal carnal mind. This is called laying the axe at the root of the evil. Don't try to destroy evil in a person. Realize the universal nature of the carnal mind or mortal mind, and then nothingize it, because God never created a carnal mind. God never created two powers. God never created evil. Therefore, as you impersonalize and nothingize, you bring your prayer, treatment, realization to a conclusion. Then you can rest and be certain that you have really handled the situation intelligently and spiritually, because you have done honor to God in acknowledging omnipotence. You have done honor to God in acknowledging omnipresence, the presence of God within me, the very eye of my being. And you have just about wiped out the devil in the realization, the carnal mind, the universal belief in two powers, has no law of God to sustain it. That is why the evil that comes nigh our dwelling place always personalizes itself. It comes as a sin in me or a temptation in me, a false appetite in me. It always personalizes itself, or in him or her or you. Watch it, and you will notice that you never think of alcoholism, you just think about the alcoholic. You never think about drug addiction, you think about the drug addict. You never think about the universal carnal mind, you think about the evil man in prison. Because evil always comes to us in personalized form. As you read, it came to Jesus in the form of a devil. It's always personalizing itself, but there was no devil there. No. It was just a temptation in Jesus' mind, and it had to be met in his mind. And so, there's no evil person confronting you. There's no evil condition confronting you. This is a personalization of the impersonal, carnal mind. The belief in two powers. Not your belief or mine. The belief in two powers. And as you recognize this and impersonalize this, the evil falls away from the person. Whether it's a sin, a disease, an appetite, whatever it may be, it falls away from them. sometimes very quickly, sometimes slowly, depending on their degree of receptivity. Now, as you study the message of the infinite way, watch and notice that there's hardly a chapter of a book that does not give you both parts of this principle. There isn't a tape that doesn't give you both parts of this principle in one way or another. And then I think you'll realize when you pick up the contemplative life that you've really found the Bible of the infinite way. You'll find this all through. You see, the importance of this is far greater than you imagine, because it isn't really that you should find health or abundance or happiness. Be assured that God has no interest in that at all. The reason for this is that God's laws should be made manifest through you to the world, that through you the entire world may witness the laws of God in operation. You know, if there were 10,000 of us in the infinite way, or 100,000 eventually, who really came to health, wealth, and happiness, it would be a useless task, since there are 3 billion people on earth and more being born every day. So our regeneration would be meaningless. It is only in so far as the light coming to me and to you is permitted to be shown forth in the world that we serve any purpose on earth. And we weren't sent here just to become happy human beings. We were sent here on earth to glorify God. And the only way we can do that is to show forth the laws of God that make men free. Thank you.